Question 1. The control framework reveals a discrepancy in an applicant's submitted academic transcripts for the Allende Higher Study Center entrance exam. The applicant's stated GPA appears inconsistent with the grades listed for specific courses. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the admissions administrator to take? Option A. Search for the applicant's academic records on publicly available online platforms to cross-reference the information. Option B. Initiate a formal request to the applicant's previous educational institution for an official verification of the submitted transcript, documenting this request and any response received. Option C. Adjust the applicant's GPA based on a subjective interpretation of the course grades to align with the stated overall GPA. Option D. Contact the applicant directly to inquire about the discrepancy, requesting clarification, and any supporting documentation they may have. Correct answer is B. Initiate a formal request to the applicant's previous educational institution for an official verification of the submitted transcript, documenting this request and any response received. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an administrator to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect student privacy and data integrity. The Allende Higher Study Center entrance exam's regulatory framework, as implied by its focus on academic admissions, likely emphasizes principles of fairness, accuracy, and confidentiality in handling applicant data. Careful judgment is required to avoid actions that could compromise the integrity of the admissions process or violate student rights. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented review of the applicant's submitted materials against the established admission criteria. This method upholds the principle of fair and equitable assessment, ensuring all applicants are evaluated consistently. It aligns with likely regulatory guidelines that mandate transparent and objective admissions processes, preventing bias and ensuring that decisions are based on merit and adherence to stated requirements. This approach also implicitly supports data protection by only accessing and utilizing information directly relevant to the admissions decision, as permitted by the application process. An incorrect approach that involves directly contacting previous institutions without a clear, documented reason or applicant consent would be professionally unacceptable. This action could violate privacy regulations and ethical guidelines concerning the handling of personal information, potentially leading to a breach of confidentiality. It bypasses the established channels for verifying information and could be perceived as an overreach, undermining trust in the admissions process. Another incorrect approach, such as relying on informal hearsay or unverified online information about the applicant, is also professionally unacceptable. This deviates from the principle of objective assessment and introduces the risk of bias and misinformation. Admissions decisions must be based on credible, verifiable evidence submitted through the official application channels, as stipulated by academic integrity standards and likely data handling regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the core issue, the need to verify information for an admissions decision. 2. Consult relevant policies and regulations. Review the Allende Higher Study Center's admissions policy and any applicable data protection guidelines. 3. Assess the available information. Determine what information has been officially submitted and what is missing or requires verification. 4. Choose the most appropriate and ethical method for verification. Prioritize methods that are transparent, documented, and respect applicant privacy. 5. Document all actions taken and decisions made. Maintain a clear record of the process to ensure accountability and transparency. Question 2. The evaluation methodology shows a proposed shift towards a more project-based assessment for the Allende Higher Study Center entrance exam. What is the most appropriate approach to assess the potential impact of this change? Option A. Rely solely on the theoretical advantages of project-based learning as outlined in educational research literature to justify its adoption. Option B. Implement the project-based assessment immediately for all applicants to gauge its effectiveness through real-time performance data. Option C. Conduct a pilot study with a diverse group of prospective students, analyze the results for fairness and predictive validity, and gather feedback from admissions faculty and current students. Option D. Focus the impact assessment primarily on the cost savings associated with reduced reliance on traditional standardized testing formats. The correct answer is C. Conduct a pilot study with a diverse group of prospective students, analyze the results for fairness and predictive validity, and gather feedback from admissions faculty and current students. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Allende Higher Study Center, as an educational institution, is responsible for ensuring the integrity and fairness of its entrance examination. The impact assessment of a new evaluation methodology requires a thorough understanding of its potential effects on candidates, the institution's reputation, and its commitment to academic standards. Careful judgment is needed to balance innovation with established principles of fairness and accessibility. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted impact assessment that considers not only the academic validity of the new methodology, but also its potential biases, accessibility for diverse candidate backgrounds, and alignment with the center's educational mission. This approach is justified by the ethical obligation of educational institutions to provide equitable opportunities and to base admissions on merit, as well as any implicit or explicit regulatory guidelines governing higher education admissions in the relevant jurisdiction, assuming a hypothetical framework for a Allende Higher Study Center. This would include ensuring the methodology does not inadvertently disadvantage specific groups and that it accurately predicts a candidate's potential for success at the center. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the perceived efficiency or novelty of the new methodology without adequately assessing its broader implications. For instance, adopting a methodology that is heavily reliant on a specific type of prior knowledge not universally taught could create an unfair advantage for some candidates and disadvantage others, violating principles of equal opportunity. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a methodology without pilot testing or seeking feedback from stakeholders, such as current students or faculty, which could lead to unforeseen negative consequences and undermine the credibility of the admissions process. A third incorrect approach would be to prioritize a methodology that is easily quantifiable, but does not effectively measure the critical thinking and problem-solving skills essential for success at a Allende Higher Study Center, thus failing to uphold academic standards. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objectives of the evaluation methodology. This should be followed by identifying potential impacts across various dimensions: academic, ethical, operational, social. Next, relevant stakeholders should be consulted, and data should be gathered to assess these impacts. Finally, a reasoned decision should be made based on the evidence, prioritizing fairness, validity, and alignment with the institution's mission, while adhering to any applicable regulatory or ethical guidelines. Question 3. Compliance review shows that an applicant to a Allende Higher Study Center has presented a transcript with a significant dip in grades during their penultimate academic year, accompanied by a personal statement explaining a family health crisis during that period. The admissions committee is deliberating on how to evaluate this applicant. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of fair and equitable admissions at a Allende Higher Study Center? Option A. Immediately disqualify the applicant based on the lower grades in the penultimate year, as this indicates a lack of consistent academic performance. Option B. Conduct a holistic review of the applicant's entire academic record, extracurricular activities, and the provided explanation for the grade dip, assessing their overall potential for success at the center. Option C. Request additional medical documentation from the applicant to verify the family health crisis before considering their application further. Option D. Focus solely on the applicant's most recent academic year's grades, disregarding the dip in the previous year and the provided explanation. The correct answer is B. Conduct a holistic review of the applicant's entire academic record, extracurricular activities, and the provided explanation for the grade dip, assessing their overall potential for success at the center. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the admissions committee at a Allende Higher Study Center must balance the institution's commitment to academic integrity and fair evaluation with the potential impact of external factors on an applicant's performance. The committee needs to make a judgment call that is both ethically sound and compliant with the Allende Higher Study Center's established admissions policies, which are implicitly governed by principles of fairness and meritocracy expected in higher education. The core of the challenge lies in distinguishing between genuine academic potential and circumstances that may have temporarily hindered a student's performance, without resorting to subjective biases or discriminatory practices. The correct approach involves a holistic review that considers the applicant's overall academic trajectory, extracurricular involvement, and any provided context for the lower grades. This approach is justified by the ethical imperative to provide all applicants a fair chance and to recognize that a single semester's performance, especially when explained by extenuating circumstances, may not be representative of a student's true capabilities. It aligns with the principle of equitable assessment, ensuring that the admissions process is not unduly punitive and allows for a nuanced understanding of each applicant's profile. This method promotes a more inclusive and accurate selection process, reflecting the diverse backgrounds and experiences of potential students. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the lower grades without considering any mitigating factors fails to acknowledge the complexity of student performance and can lead to an unfair exclusion of otherwise qualified candidates. This approach violates the ethical principle of fairness by applying a rigid, unyielding standard that ignores individual circumstances. It also risks being inconsistent with the spirit of a comprehensive admissions process that aims to identify potential, not just past performance in isolation. Another incorrect approach that involves immediately disqualifying the applicant based on the lower grades without any further investigation or consideration of the provided explanation is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to engage in a thorough assessment. It prioritizes a superficial reading of the application over a deeper understanding of the applicant's situation, potentially leading to a biased decision. This approach neglects the ethical responsibility to evaluate each applicant on their merits and to provide a reasonable opportunity for explanation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly review all submitted application materials, including transcripts, personal statements, and any supporting documents. Second, identify any discrepancies or areas that require further clarification, such as a dip in grades. Third, consider any explanations provided by the applicant for these discrepancies. Fourth, evaluate the applicant's performance in the context of their entire academic history and other application components. Finally, make a decision based on a comprehensive and fair assessment, adhering to the established admissions criteria and ethical guidelines of the institution. Question 4. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess the impact of a newly proposed interactive learning module on student engagement and comprehension in introductory economics courses at Allende Higher Studies Center. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for rigorous impact assessment with ethical considerations and student welfare? Option A. Introduce the interactive learning module in a single section of introductory economics and rely solely on qualitative observations from the instructor regarding student participation and perceived learning. Option B. Utilize historical student performance data from previous semesters in introductory economics courses and attempt to correlate any observed trends with the introduction of the new module, without direct student involvement in the assessment. Option C. Conduct a pilot study in 2 selected sections of introductory economics, obtaining informed consent from all participating students, and using a control group in parallel sections to compare outcomes using standardized pre- and post-module assessments and anonymized engagement metrics. Option D. Implement the new interactive learning module across all introductory economics courses immediately and collect student feedback through end-of-semester surveys to gauge their perceived engagement and understanding. The correct answer is C. Conduct a pilot study in 2 selected sections of introductory economics, obtaining informed consent from all participating students, and using a control group in parallel sections to compare outcomes using standardized pre- and post-module assessments and anonymized engagement metrics. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical juncture where the institution must balance its commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of resource allocation and student support. The challenge lies in identifying the most effective and ethically sound method for assessing the impact of a new pedagogical approach on student learning outcomes, ensuring that the assessment itself does not unduly burden students or compromise the validity of the results. This requires a nuanced understanding of research ethics, data privacy, and the principles of fair and equitable evaluation, all within the framework of Allende Higher Studies Center's internal policies and any relevant national educational guidelines. The correct approach involves a carefully designed pilot study that prioritizes student consent and data anonymization. This method acknowledges the ethical imperative to inform participants about the research, obtain their voluntary agreement, and protect their privacy. By focusing on a representative sample and employing robust, non-intrusive assessment tools, it aims to gather reliable data without compromising the educational experience of the wider student body. This aligns with principles of responsible research conduct and student welfare, ensuring that any findings are both valid and ethically obtained. An incorrect approach would be to implement the new methodology across all courses without prior consent or a controlled evaluation. This disregards the fundamental ethical requirement of informed consent and could lead to a situation where students are unknowingly subjected to an experimental teaching method. Furthermore, the lack of a control group or a phased implementation makes it impossible to isolate the impact of the new methodology, thus compromising the validity of any subsequent impact assessment. This approach also fails to consider potential negative impacts on student learning or well-being. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on student feedback surveys administered after the fact, without any objective measures of learning. While student perception is valuable, it is subjective and can be influenced by factors unrelated to the pedagogical effectiveness of the new approach. This method fails to provide concrete evidence of impact and neglects the need for rigorous, data-driven evaluation. It also bypasses the ethical obligation to ensure that the assessment is comprehensive and truly reflects the intended learning outcomes. A further incorrect approach would be to use readily available, aggregated student performance data from previous years to infer the impact of the new methodology. This is flawed because it does not account for the numerous variables that can influence student performance over time, such as changes in curriculum, faculty, or student demographics. It also fails to establish a direct causal link between the new pedagogical approach and any observed changes in performance, making the impact assessment unreliable and ethically questionable due to the lack of a controlled comparison. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, clearly define the research question and desired outcomes. Second, consult relevant institutional policies and ethical guidelines. Third, design a methodology that is both scientifically sound and ethically responsible, prioritizing student welfare and data integrity. Fourth, seek appropriate ethical review and approval. And finally, implement the evaluation with transparency and ongoing monitoring. Question 5. Benchmark analysis indicates that the Allende Higher Study Center's admissions process is designed to be meritocratic and transparent. A senior faculty member, who is also a close friend of a prominent alumnus, requests that you give special consideration to the alumnus's child, who is applying for admission. The child's academic record is strong, but falls slightly below the average for admitted students in the previous year. What is the most appropriate course of action to maintain the integrity of the admissions process? Option A. Conduct a thorough and objective evaluation of the applicant's qualifications against the established admission criteria, documenting the assessment process and the rationale for the final decision, irrespective of the faculty member's request. Option B. Discreetly adjust the applicant's assessment scores to align them more closely with the typical profile of admitted students, thereby accommodating the request while appearing to follow standard procedures. Option C. Inform the faculty member that the applicant's record is not competitive and suggest they encourage the applicant to reapply in a future cycle after strengthening their academic profile. Option D. Grant the applicant preferential admission due to the strong recommendation from the senior faculty member and the alumnus's influence, ensuring the applicant meets the minimum stated requirements. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough and objective evaluation of the applicant's qualifications against the established admission criteria, documenting the assessment process and the rationale for the final decision, irrespective of the faculty member's request. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of academic admissions while facing potential external pressures. The core difficulty lies in balancing the integrity of the admissions process with the desire to accommodate a specific candidate, potentially influenced by external relationships. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are based on merit and adherence to established guidelines, rather than undue influence. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the candidate's qualifications against the established criteria for admission to the Allende Higher Studies Center. This approach upholds the principles of fairness and transparency inherent in academic admissions. Specifically, it aligns with the Allende Higher Studies Center's stated commitment to merit-based selection and its internal regulations governing the admissions process, which would mandate objective evaluation of all applicants. This ensures that the center maintains its academic standards and reputation. An incorrect approach that prioritizes the candidate's family connections over objective assessment would represent a significant ethical failure. This would violate the principle of equal opportunity for all applicants and undermine the credibility of the admissions process. Such an action could also contravene specific Allende Higher Studies Center policies that prohibit preferential treatment based on personal relationships, potentially leading to disciplinary action. Another incorrect approach, which involves seeking to bypass or alter the standard assessment procedures, would be a direct violation of academic integrity and potentially internal Allende Higher Studies Center regulations. This could be construed as an attempt to manipulate the admissions outcome, thereby compromising the fairness of the process and the reputation of the institution. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the Allende Higher Studies Center's admissions policies and ethical guidelines. When faced with a situation where external factors might influence a decision, a professional must first confirm the objective criteria for evaluation. If there is any ambiguity or potential for bias, seeking guidance from a supervisor or the admissions committee is crucial. The decision must always be defensible based on established rules and a commitment to fairness and academic merit. Question 6. Operational review demonstrates a pattern of submitted assignment exhibiting significant similarities in phrasing and structure across multiple students in a specific course, raising concerns about potential academic misconduct. The course instructor has flagged these submissions for review. Which of the following actions best aligns with the Allende Higher Studies Center's commitment to academic integrity and fair process? Option A. Initiate a formal investigation process, gathering evidence of plagiarism or collusion, notifying the affected students of the allegations, and providing them with an opportunity to respond before any disciplinary action is considered. Option B. Immediately issue formal warnings to all flagged students, citing academic dishonesty based on the observed similarities. Option C. Request the IT department to block access to assignment submission portals for the flagged students pending further review. Option D. Advise the instructor to accept the submitted assignments as is, given the limited resources available for in-depth plagiarism checks. The correct answer is B. Immediately issue formal warnings to all flagged students, citing academic dishonesty based on the observed similarities. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in academic institutions, balancing the need for robust academic integrity with the practicalities of student support and resource allocation. The challenge lies in identifying and addressing potential academic misconduct without unduly penalizing students or creating an overly punitive environment. A careful, evidence-based approach is crucial to uphold the institution's standards while fostering a fair and supportive learning atmosphere. The correct approach involves a systematic and fair investigation process that prioritizes gathering evidence and providing the student with an opportunity to respond. This aligns with the principles of natural justice and due process, which are fundamental to maintaining academic integrity and student trust. Specifically, it adheres to the Allende Higher Studies Center's established policies on academic misconduct, which likely mandate a thorough review of evidence, notification of the accused, and a chance for explanation before any disciplinary action is taken. This ensures that decisions are informed, equitable, and defensible. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate punitive measures without investigation fails to uphold due process. It risks making arbitrary decisions, damaging student morale, and potentially violating the institution's own disciplinary procedures. This approach disregards the principle that accusations must be substantiated by evidence. Another incorrect approach that involves overlooking potential misconduct due to resource constraints is ethically unsound and undermines the institution's commitment to academic excellence. It creates a precedent that academic integrity can be compromised by operational limitations, which is unacceptable. This approach fails to address the root cause of potential misconduct and erodes the credibility of the institution. Finally, an approach that relies on hearsay or unsubstantiated allegations without independent verification is professionally irresponsible. It can lead to unfair accusations and damage reputations. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a commitment to objective evidence, adherence to established procedures, and a balanced consideration of all relevant factors, ensuring that any action taken is proportionate and justifiable. Question 7. Stakeholder feedback indicates that some prospective students feel the current essay prompt for the Allende Higher Study Center entrance exam may inadvertently favor applicants with specific prior academic exposure, potentially creating an uneven playing field. The admissions committee needs to decide how to address this feedback while maintaining the integrity and fairness of the examination process. Option A. Acknowledge the feedback in a general statement to all applicants but proceed with the current essay prompt without further investigation, stating that the exam is designed to assess a broad range of skills. Option B. Initiate a formal review of the essay prompt by a subcommittee of the admissions committee, consulting relevant academic advisors and reviewing past exam performance data to determine if the prompt requires modification to ensure equitable assessment of all candidates, with any proposed changes to be ratified by the full committee before implementation. Option C. Immediately revise the essay prompt to a more general topic that requires no specialized knowledge based on the feedback received, and communicate the change to all registered applicants. Option D. Conduct individual interviews with the stakeholders who provided the feedback to gather more specific details about their concerns and potential alternative prompt suggestions. Correct answer is B. Initiate a formal review of the essay prompt by a subcommittee of the admissions committee, consulting relevant academic advisors and reviewing past exam performance data to determine if the prompt requires modification to ensure equitable assessment of all candidates, with any proposed changes to be ratified by the full committee before implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data and ensure fair processes. The Allende Higher Study Center entrance exam framework emphasizes integrity and transparency in its admissions process. A key regulatory principle is the responsible handling of applicant information and the avoidance of any perception of bias or unfair advantage. The correct approach involves a structured and transparent process for gathering and evaluating feedback, ensuring that all feedback is considered within the established examination guidelines. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it upholds the principles of fairness and due process. By acknowledging the feedback and initiating a review process that adheres to the established examination protocols, the institution demonstrates its commitment to an impartial assessment. This aligns with the overarching goal of the entrance exam to identify qualified candidates based on merit, without undue influence from external or internal pressures. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate implementation of suggested changes without proper review fails to adhere to the established examination framework. This could lead to arbitrary decisions that undermine the credibility of the exam and potentially violate principles of fairness to all applicants. Another incorrect approach that dismisses feedback without consideration ignores the importance of stakeholder engagement and continuous improvement, which are often implicit expectations within educational institutions, even if not explicitly codified in every regulation. Furthermore, an approach that prioritizes anecdotal evidence over systematic data collection risks making decisions based on incomplete or biased information, which is contrary to the rigorous standards expected in academic admissions. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the nature and source of the feedback. This involves assessing its relevance to the examination's objectives and regulatory compliance. The next step is to evaluate the feedback against existing policies and procedures. If the feedback highlights potential areas for improvement or concerns about fairness, a systematic review process should be initiated. This review should be objective, data-driven where possible, and conducted in accordance with the institution's established governance and examination guidelines. The outcome of the review should then inform decisions, ensuring that any actions taken are justifiable, transparent, and aligned with the overarching principles of the Allende Higher Study Center entrance exam. Question 8. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess the potential impact of a new interdisciplinary program at Allende Higher Study Center. Which of the following approaches would best ensure a comprehensive and ethically sound evaluation, aligning with the center's commitment to academic rigor and student success? Option A. Gathering extensive qualitative feedback from a limited number of current faculty members regarding their perceived workload changes. Option B. Implementing a mixed methods approach that combines quantitative data on projected enrollment and resource allocation with qualitative data on student learning experiences and faculty integration. Option C. Conducting a detailed financial projection based on anticipated tuition revenue and direct operational costs without considering other factors. Option D. Relying solely on market research reports to gauge the demand for similar programs at other institutions. Correct answer is C. Conducting a detailed financial projection based on anticipated tuition revenue and direct operational costs without considering other factors. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in determining the most appropriate method for assessing the impact of a proposed new academic program at Allende Higher Study Center. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for comprehensive data with the practical constraints of time and resources, while adhering to the internal guidelines and ethical considerations of the institution. A robust impact assessment is crucial for informed decision-making regarding resource allocation, curriculum development, and potential student outcomes. The correct approach involves a multifaceted impact assessment that considers both quantitative and qualitative data. This method is right because it provides a holistic view of the program's potential effects. Quantitatively, it allows for the projection of student enrollment, resource needs, faculty, facilities, and potential revenue. Qualitatively, it enables the exploration of impacts on faculty workload, student learning experiences, and the institution's reputation. This comprehensive approach aligns with the principles of responsible academic planning and ensures that decisions are based on a thorough understanding of potential consequences, as implicitly guided by the center's commitment to academic excellence and student welfare. An approach that solely relies on projected enrollment figures is incorrect because it offers a narrow, financially driven perspective. This fails to account for crucial qualitative impacts on the learning environment, faculty capacity, and the overall student experience, potentially leading to an unbalanced or unsustainable program. An approach that prioritizes gathering extensive anecdotal feedback from a small group of current students is incorrect because, while qualitative data is valuable, an over-reliance on a limited sample size can lead to biased conclusions. This method may not represent the broader student body or accurately predict the impact on future students, thus failing to provide a representative assessment. An approach that focuses exclusively on the potential for immediate cost savings is incorrect because it prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term academic quality and institutional sustainability. This narrow focus neglects the broader impact on educational outcomes, faculty morale, and the center's strategic objectives, which are essential for responsible institutional development. Professionals should approach impact assessment by first clearly defining the scope and objectives of the assessment. This involves identifying key stakeholders and the types of impacts to be considered e.g., academic, financial, operational, reputational. Subsequently, a mixed methods approach, combining quantitative and qualitative data collection and analysis, should be employed. This ensures a balanced perspective. Finally, findings should be synthesized to provide actionable insights for decision-making, always considering the ethical implications and the long-term well-being of the institution and its students. Question 9. Governance review demonstrates a potential conflict of interest involving a member of the admissions committee and an applicant who is a close relative. The review suggests that, while the relationship is known, its influence on the applicant's evaluation is unclear. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation in accordance with the principles of academic integrity and fair process expected at Allende Higher Study Center? Option A. Conduct a thorough, objective investigation to determine the extent of the conflict and its actual impact on the admissions decision, gathering evidence and interviewing relevant parties before making any determination. Option B. Instruct the admissions committee member to recuse themselves from all future admissions decisions without investigating the current applicant's case. Option C. Immediately disqualify the applicant from the admissions process to avoid any perception of impropriety, regardless of the actual influence of the relationship. Option D. Overlook the potential conflict, assuming that the admissions committee operates with sufficient integrity to ensure fair evaluation. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough, objective investigation to determine the extent of the conflict and its actual impact on the admissions decision, gathering evidence and interviewing relevant parties before making any determination. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the governance review has identified a potential conflict of interest that, if not addressed, could undermine the integrity of the Allende Higher Study Center's admissions process and its reputation. The challenge lies in balancing the need to uphold ethical standards and regulatory compliance with the practicalities of managing relationships and ensuring fair evaluation. Careful judgment is required to determine the most appropriate course of action that mitigates risk without causing undue disruption or appearing overly punitive. The correct approach involves a thorough, objective investigation into the specific nature and extent of the potential conflict of interest. This includes gathering all relevant information, interviewing involved parties, and assessing the actual impact on the admissions decisions. The justification for this approach lies in the principle of due process and the need for evidence-based decision-making, which are fundamental to ethical governance and regulatory compliance. By conducting a detailed impact assessment, the institution can ensure that any subsequent actions are proportionate and fair, adhering to the spirit and letter of any applicable internal policies and external guidelines governing conflicts of interest and academic integrity. This methodical process prevents hasty judgments and ensures that decisions are defensible. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the applicant or the admissions committee member without a proper investigation. This fails to acknowledge the possibility that the relationship, while present, may not have influenced the outcome. Such an action would be procedurally unfair and could lead to legal challenges or damage to the institution's reputation for impartiality. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the findings of the governance review altogether. This demonstrates a disregard for established governance procedures and a failure to uphold ethical responsibilities, potentially exposing the institution to regulatory sanctions and a loss of public trust. A third incorrect approach would be to implement a superficial review that does not genuinely assess the impact of the conflict. This would be a mere token gesture, failing to address the root cause of the concern and leaving the institution vulnerable to future issues. Professionals in such situations should employ a structured decision-making framework. This typically involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting the identified issue. 2. Initiating a fact-finding process to gather objective evidence. 3. Analyzing the evidence against established policies, ethical codes, and relevant regulations. 4. Identifying and assessing potential risks and consequences of different courses of action. 5. Consulting with relevant stakeholders or legal counsel if necessary. 6. Determining and implementing the most appropriate, proportionate, and defensible course of action. 7. Documenting the entire process and the rationale for the final decision. Question 10. The assessment process reveals that a proposed revision to the Allende Higher Study Center entrance exams format, intended to streamline administration, may inadvertently disadvantage applicants with specific learning styles. Which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for conducting such an assessment? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the potential effects of the format revision on diverse applicant groups, the validity of the assessment, and the overall fairness of the admissions process, seeking input from relevant academic and administrative bodies. Option B. Implement the revision based on the recommendation of the administrative department responsible for scheduling without further independent evaluation to expedite the process. Option C. Proceed with the format revision, assuming that any potential disadvantages will be minor and can be addressed through post-implementation adjustments, prioritizing administrative efficiency. Option D. Focus the assessment solely on the cost savings associated with the proposed format change, as this is a primary driver for the revision. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the potential effects of the format revision on diverse applicant groups, the validity of the assessment, and the overall fairness of the admissions process, seeking input from relevant academic and administrative bodies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure the integrity of an admissions process. The Allende Higher Study Center entrance exam's regulatory framework emphasizes fairness, transparency, and the avoidance of undue influence. Careful judgment is required to uphold these principles. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective impact assessment of the proposed changes on the fairness and validity of the entrance exam. This approach is right because it directly addresses the core regulatory and ethical obligations of maintaining an impartial admissions process. By systematically evaluating how the proposed changes might affect different applicant groups, the accessibility of the exam, and the overall reliability of the assessment, the individual acts in accordance with the principles of good governance and academic integrity mandated by the Allende Higher Study Center's guidelines. This proactive and analytical method ensures that any decisions made are informed by a clear understanding of potential consequences and are aligned with the institution's commitment to equitable opportunity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the perceived benefits of the changes without considering potential negative impacts fails to meet the regulatory requirement for a comprehensive impact assessment. This oversight can lead to unintended discrimination or a dilution of the exam's effectiveness, violating the principles of fairness and equity. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes expediency or the preferences of a particular stakeholder group over a rigorous evaluation risks compromising the integrity of the admissions process. This can lead to decisions that are not evidence-based and may not serve the best interests of the institution or its applicants, potentially contravening ethical guidelines on impartiality and due diligence. A further incorrect approach that dismisses the need for an impact assessment altogether, perhaps due to time constraints or a belief that the changes are minor, is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This disregard for due process can result in unforeseen negative consequences that undermine the credibility of the entrance exam and the institution. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core principles and regulations governing the process. They should then gather relevant information, conduct a thorough and unbiased assessment of potential impacts, consider all stakeholder perspectives, and make a decision that is demonstrably aligned with regulatory requirements and ethical standards. This systematic approach ensures accountability and upholds the integrity of the institution. Question 11. The efficiency study reveals that adopting new digital learning platforms could significantly reduce operational costs for Allende Higher Study Center. Which of the following approaches best ensures that this transition enhances, rather than compromises, the quality of education and student experience? Option A. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates pedagogical effectiveness, faculty training needs, student accessibility, and data security before making a decision. Option B. Prioritizing the platforms with the lowest upfront licensing fees and fastest implementation timelines to realize cost savings quickly. Option C. Implementing the most technologically advanced platforms available, assuming they will automatically improve learning outcomes regardless of specific course needs or faculty readiness. Option D. Focusing exclusively on the projected financial savings, with minimal consultation with faculty or students, to expedite the decision-making process. The correct answer is B. Prioritizing the platforms with the lowest upfront licensing fees and fastest implementation timelines to realize cost savings quickly. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential for significant cost savings through the adoption of new digital learning platforms at Allende Higher Study Center. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the pursuit of operational efficiency and financial prudence with the paramount responsibility of ensuring the quality of education and student welfare. A hasty or poorly considered implementation could negatively impact student learning outcomes, faculty adoption, and the overall academic environment. Careful judgment is required to assess not only the financial benefits, but also the pedagogical implications and the practicalities of integration. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that meticulously evaluates the potential effects of the new digital platforms across multiple dimensions. This includes assessing the pedagogical suitability of the platforms for various courses, the required faculty training and support, the potential impact on student access and equity, considering digital literacy and resource availability, data privacy and security implications, and the long-term sustainability of the chosen solutions. This approach aligns with the ethical obligation of educational institutions to provide a high-quality learning experience and to act in the best interests of their students and faculty. It also implicitly adheres to principles of responsible innovation and due diligence, ensuring that technological advancements serve, rather than hinder, the core mission of education. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the projected cost savings, without a thorough evaluation of pedagogical impact, would be professionally unacceptable. This failure would neglect the primary purpose of the institution education and could lead to the adoption of tools that are not conducive to effective learning, potentially harming student outcomes and faculty morale. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes rapid implementation to achieve immediate cost reductions, bypassing essential stakeholder consultations, faculty, students, IT departments, would also be professionally unsound. This would disregard the importance of buy-in and practical considerations, leading to resistance, technical issues, and a failure to realize the intended benefits. Such an approach breaches principles of good governance and collaborative decision-making within an academic setting. A third incorrect approach that overlooks data privacy and security concerns when selecting new platforms would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Educational institutions handle sensitive student and faculty data, and any new technology must comply with relevant data protection laws and ethical standards to prevent breaches and maintain trust. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured, multi-stakeholder approach. This includes clearly defining the objectives of the proposed change, conducting a thorough risk-benefit analysis that encompasses pedagogical, operational, financial, and ethical considerations, engaging all relevant stakeholders early and continuously, piloting new technologies where feasible, and establishing clear metrics for success and ongoing evaluation. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, responsible, and aligned with the institution's mission and values. Question 12. The evaluation methodology shows that the admissions committee at Allende Higher Studies Center is reviewing a candidate's application. While the candidate's academic record is strong, their extracurricular involvement is varied, including volunteer work at a local animal shelter, participation in a debate club, and informal tutoring of younger students. How should the committee best assess the impact of these extracurricular activities on the candidate's potential for success at Allende Higher Studies Center, in accordance with the institution's guidelines for holistic admissions? Option A. Assign a standardized point value to each type of extracurricular activity based on its perceived prestige or time commitment, regardless of the candidate's personal experience. Option B. Qualitatively assess the depth of engagement and the transferable skills demonstrated by each activity, considering how they align with Allende's values of community contribution and intellectual curiosity. Option C. Prioritize extracurricular activities that are highly competitive or have received formal recognition, even if the candidate's personal involvement was minimal. Option D. Focus solely on the academic achievements, as extracurricular activities are secondary to a candidate's ability to perform in coursework. Correct answer is B. Qualitatively assess the depth of engagement and the transferable skills demonstrated by each activity, considering how they align with Allende's values of community contribution and intellectual curiosity. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical juncture in the admissions process at Allende Higher Studies Center, requiring careful consideration of how to assess the impact of a candidate's extracurricular activities on their potential academic success. This scenario is professionally challenging because it demands a balanced approach that acknowledges the value of holistic development without compromising the integrity and fairness of the admissions criteria. The admissions committee must navigate the subjective nature of evaluating non-academic achievements while adhering to the established guidelines of the Allende Higher Studies Center. The correct approach involves a qualitative assessment of the depth and relevance of extracurricular involvement, considering how these experiences demonstrate skills such as leadership, teamwork, problem-solving, and commitment, which are indicative of a candidate's potential to thrive in the academic environment. This aligns with the Allende Higher Studies Center's stated commitment to fostering well-rounded individuals and its guidelines for a comprehensive admissions review. The justification lies in the principle of assessing a candidate's potential beyond mere academic scores, recognizing that diverse experiences can contribute to a richer learning environment and a more successful academic journey. This approach is ethically sound as it promotes fairness by considering a broader spectrum of a candidate's attributes. An incorrect approach would be to assign arbitrary numerical values to different types of extracurricular activities without considering the context or the skills developed. This fails to acknowledge the unique contributions each candidate brings and can lead to an inequitable assessment. It also risks overlooking candidates who may have had fewer opportunities for structured extracurriculars, but have demonstrated significant personal growth or commitment in other ways. Another incorrect approach would be to disregard extracurricular activities entirely, focusing solely on academic metrics. This would contradict the Allende Higher Study Center's stated philosophy of holistic development, and could result in the exclusion of highly promising candidates who possess valuable soft skills and a strong potential for contribution to the university community. This approach is ethically questionable, as it limits the scope of evaluation and may not accurately reflect a candidate's overall suitability. A further incorrect approach would be to prioritize activities that are perceived as more prestigious or competitive, regardless of the candidate's personal engagement or the skills acquired. This can lead to a biased selection process that favors certain backgrounds or opportunities, rather than focusing on the individual's demonstrated capabilities and potential. This approach fails to uphold the principle of meritocracy and can inadvertently perpetuate inequalities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves first thoroughly understanding the specific institutional guidelines and values. Then, the committee should develop a framework for evaluating qualitative data that is as objective and consistent as possible. This includes defining criteria for assessing the impact of experiences, considering the candidate's self-reflection on these activities, and ensuring that the evaluation process is transparent and fair to all applicants. Question 13. Upon reviewing the preliminary research proposal for a student applying for a prestigious scholarship at Allende Higher Study Center, an academic advisor realizes that the student is their sibling. The advisor has been mentoring this sibling informally for several years on their academic pursuits. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the academic advisor? Option A. Proceed with evaluating the proposal as objectively as possible, believing their professional judgment can overcome any personal bias. Option B. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to the scholarship committee and recuse themselves from any further involvement in the student's scholarship application review process. Option C. Delegate the review of the proposal to a junior colleague without mentioning the personal connection, assuming the colleague will be objective. Option D. Discreetly provide the student with advanced insights into the scholarship committee's preferences and evaluation criteria to help them tailor their proposal. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to the scholarship committee and recuse themselves from any further involvement in the student's scholarship application review process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure that their actions align with the ethical guidelines and academic integrity expected by Allende Higher Study Center. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining objectivity and avoiding any perception of bias when evaluating a project submitted by someone with whom they have a close personal relationship. Careful judgment is required to uphold the reputation of the institution and the fairness of the assessment process. The correct approach involves a transparent disclosure of the personal relationship to the relevant academic authority and recusal from the assessment process. This upholds professional integrity by acknowledging the potential for bias and prioritizing the fairness and impartiality of the evaluation. This aligns with the implicit ethical framework of academic institutions that demand objectivity in assessments and require individuals to step aside when their personal connections could compromise such objectivity. It prevents any appearance of favoritism or undue influence, thereby safeguarding the credibility of the academic judgment. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the assessment without disclosure fails to address the inherent conflict of interest. This is a significant ethical failure as it breaches the trust placed in the assessor and can lead to an unfair evaluation, potentially disadvantaging other students. It also creates a situation where the assessment could be challenged, undermining the academic process. Another incorrect approach, which is to subtly influence the assessment in favor of the acquaintance without explicit disclosure, is even more egregious. This constitutes a direct violation of academic integrity and ethical conduct. It is a form of academic misconduct that can have severe consequences for both the assessor and the student, and it erodes the fundamental principles of merit-based evaluation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive assessment of potential conflicts of interest. When a personal relationship exists that could reasonably influence judgment, the professional obligation is to immediately disclose this to the appropriate authority, e.g., department head, academic dean. Following disclosure, the professional should be prepared to recuse themselves from any decision-making or evaluative role related to the individual or their work. This ensures that decisions are made impartially and ethically, maintaining the integrity of the institution and its processes. Question 14. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess the potential impact of a new interdisciplinary studies program on student learning outcomes. Considering the academic integrity and student welfare principles of Allende Higher Studies Center, which approach would best inform the decision to implement the program? Option A. A mixed methods approach combining analysis of student academic performance metrics, e.g., grades, retention rates, with qualitative feedback from students and faculty on their learning and teaching experiences. Option B. A comparative analysis of student performance data from similar interdisciplinary programs at other universities, assuming comparable student populations. Option C. An assessment based on faculty interviews and focus groups to gauge their confidence in delivering the new curriculum and its perceived administrative feasibility. Option D. A survey administered to students before and after the program's pilot phase, focusing on their perceptions of the program's relevance and engagement. The correct answer is A. A mixed methods approach combining analysis of student academic performance metrics, e.g., grades, retention rates, with qualitative feedback from students and faculty on their learning and teaching experiences. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in assessing the impact of a proposed curriculum change on student learning outcomes. The institution, Allende Higher Studies Center, must adhere to its internal academic regulations and any overarching educational standards that govern its accreditation and program delivery. The professional challenge lies in selecting an impact assessment methodology that is both rigorous and ethically sound, ensuring that the evaluation is fair, unbiased, and truly reflects the potential effects of the curriculum change without causing undue disruption or misrepresenting findings. The correct approach involves a mixed methods impact assessment that combines quantitative data on student performance with qualitative data on student and faculty experiences. This approach is justified by the need for a comprehensive understanding of the curriculum's effects. Quantitatively, it allows for the measurement of changes in grades, retention rates, and graduation rates, providing objective evidence of academic impact. Qualitatively, it captures the nuances of the learning experience, such as student engagement, critical thinking development, and faculty satisfaction with the new curriculum. This holistic view is crucial for making informed decisions about curriculum implementation and is aligned with best practices in educational research and institutional effectiveness, which prioritize evidence-based decision-making and student-centered learning. An approach that relies solely on pre- and post-implementation student survey data is incorrect because it is susceptible to bias and may not capture the full spectrum of impact. Surveys can be influenced by student expectations, recall bias, and the Hawthorne effect, where participants alter their behavior because they are being observed. This method lacks the objective, measurable outcomes provided by academic performance data. An approach that focuses exclusively on faculty feedback regarding the perceived ease of implementation is also incorrect. While faculty input is valuable, it primarily assesses the logistical and pedagogical feasibility from the instructor's perspective, not the actual impact on student learning. This narrow focus neglects the primary objective of curriculum change: to enhance student educational experiences and outcomes. An approach that uses historical student performance data from similar programs at other institutions is incorrect because it fails to account for the unique context of Allende Higher Studies Center. Differences in student demographics, faculty, teaching styles, and institutional resources can significantly influence learning outcomes. Relying on external benchmarks without considering internal factors can lead to inaccurate conclusions about the proposed curriculum's impact within Allende's specific environment. The professional decision-making process for such situations involves a systematic evaluation of potential methodologies against established institutional policies, ethical guidelines for research and assessment, and the specific goals of the proposed change. professionals should prioritize methods that offer robust evidence, minimize bias, and provide a balanced perspective, ensuring that the assessment serves the best interests of the students and the institution. Question 15. Strategic planning requires the Allende Higher Study Center to consider expanding its course offerings. Which of the following approaches best ensures the institution's long-term viability and compliance with educational standards? Option A. Expediting the approval process for new courses by bypassing standard institutional review committees to quickly capitalize on emerging trends. Option B. Focusing on launching programs that offer the highest potential for prestige, irrespective of the availability of qualified faculty and adequate infrastructure. Option C. Prioritizing the introduction of courses based solely on perceived immediate student demand, without a detailed financial analysis. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates financial feasibility, regulatory compliance, resource allocation, and potential effects on existing programs and student welfare. The correct answer is D. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates financial feasibility, regulatory compliance, resource allocation, and potential effects on existing programs and student welfare. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Allende Higher Study Center, as an educational institution, is subject to specific regulations governing its operational planning and resource allocation. The challenge lies in balancing the strategic vision of expanding academic offerings with the practical and regulatory constraints of financial sustainability and compliance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any expansion plan is not only ambitious, but also feasible and adheres to the established legal and ethical frameworks for higher education institutions. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that considers all relevant factors, including financial viability, regulatory compliance, and the potential effect on existing programs and student welfare. This approach is best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of responsible institutional management and good governance, which are often implicitly or explicitly mandated by educational regulatory bodies. Such an assessment ensures that decisions are data-driven, risk-aware, and ultimately serve the long-term interests of the institution and its stakeholders, preventing potential financial distress or regulatory sanctions. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate perceived student demand without a comprehensive financial feasibility study fails to adhere to prudent financial management principles. This could lead to overextension of resources, potential deficits, and ultimately, a negative impact on the quality of education provided, which could violate institutional accreditation standards or specific funding regulations. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on the prestige of new programs, neglecting the availability of qualified faculty and adequate infrastructure, demonstrates a disregard for operational realities and regulatory requirements for program quality. Educational institutions are typically required to demonstrate that they have the necessary resources and personnel to deliver programs effectively, and failure to do so can result in accreditation issues or even program closure. A third incorrect approach that involves bypassing established institutional approval processes for strategic initiatives, perhaps due to perceived urgency, undermines the principles of good governance and transparency. Many regulatory frameworks require adherence to specific procedural steps for significant institutional changes, and circumventing these can lead to invalid decisions and potential legal challenges. Professionals in strategic planning within educational institutions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the strategic objectives. This is followed by a comprehensive analysis of internal and external factors, including regulatory requirements, financial implications, operational capacity, and stakeholder impact. The process should involve robust data collection and analysis, consultation with relevant departments and experts, and adherence to established governance and approval protocols. Finally, the chosen strategy should be continuously monitored and evaluated for its effectiveness and compliance. Question 16. Examination of the data shows that a prominent alumnus has strongly recommended a candidate for admission, highlighting their personal connection and suggesting that admission would be beneficial for the institution's public relations. The candidate's academic record, while satisfactory, is not exceptionally strong compared to other applicants. The institution's admission policy emphasizes merit-based selection and objective evaluation of all applicants. What is the most appropriate approach to address this situation, ensuring compliance with Allende Higher Study Center's admission framework and ethical standards? Option A. Conduct a formal impact assessment to evaluate how admitting this candidate, considering the alumnus's recommendation and the candidate's profile, aligns with the institution's admission policies, academic standards, and potential implications for fairness and institutional integrity. Option B. Propose a modified admission pathway for this candidate that slightly adjusts the standard criteria, acknowledging the alumnus's influence while attempting to maintain a semblance of fairness. Option C. Immediately approve the candidate's admission to foster goodwill with the influential alumnus and leverage the potential public relations benefits. Option D. Politely decline the alumnus's recommendation, stating that admission decisions are solely based on academic merit, without further investigation into the candidate's profile or the implications of the recommendation. The correct answer is A. Conduct a formal impact assessment to evaluate how admitting this candidate, considering the alumnus's recommendation and the candidate's profile, aligns with the institution's admission policies, academic standards, and potential implications for fairness and institutional integrity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure the integrity of an academic institution's admissions process. The pressure to admit a candidate based on external influence, rather than solely on merit and adherence to established criteria, can compromise fairness and the reputation of Allende Higher Study Center. Careful judgment is required to uphold institutional values and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective impact assessment that prioritizes adherence to Allende Higher Study Center's established admission policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. This approach ensures that all decisions are based on documented criteria, free from undue influence. Specifically, it requires a systematic evaluation of how admitting the candidate, under the described circumstances, would affect the academic standards, fairness to other applicants, and the institution's commitment to merit-based selection, all within the bounds of the Allende Higher Study Center's internal regulations and any overarching educational oversight guidelines applicable to higher education institutions in its jurisdiction. This upholds the ethical principle of fairness and the regulatory requirement for transparent and equitable admissions. An incorrect approach that involves immediate acceptance of the candidate based on the external recommendation, without a formal impact assessment, fails to uphold the principle of fairness to other applicants who have met the standard criteria. This bypasses the established admission process and could be seen as a breach of institutional policy, potentially violating principles of academic integrity and equal opportunity. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the recommendation outright without any consideration or assessment, might be perceived as unprofessional or lacking in due diligence. While it avoids the risk of undue influence, it fails to acknowledge the potential value of information that might be relevant, even if it ultimately does not alter the admission decision. A proper assessment would consider the information provided and determine its relevance and impact according to established protocols. A further incorrect approach, which is to seek a compromise that bends the admission criteria for this specific candidate, directly undermines the integrity of the admission process. This creates a precedent for preferential treatment, eroding trust in the institution's fairness and potentially violating regulations that mandate standardized admission procedures. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Identifying the core issue, potential undue influence on an admissions decision. 2. Consulting relevant policies and regulations, understanding Allende Higher Study Center's admission criteria and any governing educational laws. 3. Conducting an objective assessment, evaluating the impact of the recommendation against established standards. 4. Documenting the process, recording the assessment and the rationale for the final decision. 5. Seeking guidance if necessary, consulting with supervisors or ethics committees if the situation is complex or ambiguous. Question 17. Assessment of the ethical implications of a student evaluating a project submitted by a close family friend for a mandatory course requirement at the Allende Higher Study Center, where the student has been assigned the task of providing a critical review. Option A. Discuss the project's potential weaknesses with the family friend beforehand to help them improve it before the formal evaluation. Option B. Proceed with the evaluation, focusing solely on the technical merits of the project and assuming objectivity. Option C. Disclose the personal relationship to the course instructor and recuse oneself from the evaluation, requesting an alternative assignment. Option D. Provide a favorable review to the family friend, subtly overlooking minor flaws to maintain the friendship. The correct answer is C. Disclose the personal relationship to the course instructor and recuse oneself from the evaluation, requesting an alternative assignment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure that their actions align with the ethical standards and regulatory requirements expected of students and future professionals within the Allende Higher Studies Center's framework. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining objectivity and avoiding undue influence when evaluating a project that directly benefits a personal connection. Careful judgment is required to uphold academic integrity and the reputation of the institution. The correct approach involves a transparent declaration of the personal relationship and recusal from any decision-making process that could be perceived as biased. This upholds the principle of impartiality, a cornerstone of ethical conduct in academic and professional settings. By stepping aside, the individual ensures that the evaluation is conducted fairly and objectively, free from any suspicion of favoritism. This aligns with the implicit ethical guidelines of academic institutions that prioritize merit and fairness in assessments, and the broader professional expectation of avoiding conflicts of interest. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the assessment without disclosure fails to acknowledge the potential for bias. This is a direct violation of ethical principles that demand transparency and the avoidance of situations where personal interests could compromise professional judgment. Such an action could lead to accusations of favoritism, undermining the credibility of the assessment and the individual's integrity. Another incorrect approach, which is to subtly influence the assessment in favor of the acquaintance, represents a severe ethical breach. This involves active deception and a deliberate manipulation of the evaluation process for personal gain or to benefit a friend. This not only violates academic integrity, but also breaches the trust placed in the individual by the Allende Higher Studies Center and its community. It can lead to severe disciplinary action and damage to one's academic and future professional career. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear self-assessment of any potential conflicts of interest. If a personal relationship exists that could influence judgment, the first step is always to disclose this relationship to the relevant authority or supervisor. Following disclosure, the professional should be prepared to recuse themselves from any decision-making or evaluative role that could be compromised. This proactive and transparent approach is crucial for maintaining ethical standards and professional credibility. Question 18. Which approach would be most appropriate for Allende Higher Studies Center to evaluate the potential introduction of a new interdisciplinary program that integrates technology across all humanities courses? Option A. Prioritize the potential for reduced departmental budgets by merging existing technology resources and faculty expertise, assuming this will lead to overall efficiency gains. Option B. Focus primarily on the perceived innovative appeal of the program and its potential to attract new students, without extensive analysis of operational or academic consequences. Option C. Rely on informal discussions with a few senior faculty members and a review of similar programs at other institutions to gauge the program's viability. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment, systematically analyzing potential effects on student learning outcomes, faculty workload, resource allocation, and institutional reputation, while engaging relevant stakeholders. Correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment, systematically analyzing potential effects on student learning outcomes, faculty workload, resource allocation, and institutional reputation, while engaging relevant stakeholders. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the proposed change to the curriculum at Allende Higher Studies Center has the potential for significant impact on students, faculty, and the institution's reputation. A thorough impact assessment is crucial to ensure that any changes are well considered, ethically sound, and aligned with the center's educational mission and regulatory obligations. The challenge lies in balancing the desire for innovation with the responsibility to maintain academic quality and student welfare. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive impact assessment. This entails systematically identifying, analyzing, and evaluating the potential positive and negative consequences of the proposed curriculum changes across various stakeholder groups. It requires gathering data, consulting with affected parties, and considering both quantitative and qualitative factors. This approach is ethically justified as it upholds principles of transparency, fairness, and due diligence. From a regulatory perspective, it aligns with the general expectation that educational institutions will make informed decisions that benefit their students and maintain academic standards, even if specific regulations for Allende Higher Studies Center are not detailed here. The principle of responsible governance is universal. An approach that focuses solely on the perceived benefits without considering potential drawbacks is ethically flawed. It risks overlooking negative consequences for students, such as increased workload or reduced access to essential learning opportunities, and could lead to a decline in academic quality. This approach fails to demonstrate due diligence and a commitment to student welfare. An approach that prioritizes cost savings above all else is also ethically problematic. While financial sustainability is important, it should not come at the expense of educational quality or student well-being. This approach could lead to decisions that compromise the learning experience and violate the institution's responsibility to provide a valuable education. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence and personal opinions without systematic data collection or stakeholder consultation is professionally unsound. It lacks the rigor necessary for informed decision-making and can lead to biased conclusions. This approach fails to meet the standards of responsible academic governance and could result in detrimental changes. Professionals should approach such decisions by first understanding the scope and potential implications of the proposed change. This involves defining clear objectives for the assessment, identifying all relevant stakeholders, and determining the methods for data collection and analysis. A structured impact assessment framework, even if not explicitly mandated by a specific regulation for Allende Higher Studies Center, provides a robust methodology for gathering evidence, evaluating risks and benefits, and making well-reasoned recommendations that are ethically defensible and professionally responsible. Question 19. Implementation of a new admissions criterion at Allende Higher Studies Center designed to assess a candidate's demonstrated resilience in overcoming academic challenges is being considered. Before its formal adoption, which of the following represents the most responsible and ethically sound approach to ensure fairness and compliance? Option A. Immediately implement the criterion, assuming that academic institutions inherently select for resilience. Option B. Conduct a formal impact assessment to analyze the criterion's potential effects on diverse applicant groups and explore mitigation strategies. Option C. Solicit informal opinions from a few senior faculty members known for their strong academic judgment. Option D. Rely solely on the criterion's perceived academic merit without further investigation into its practical application. Correct answer is B. Conduct a formal impact assessment to analyze the criterion's potential effects on diverse applicant groups and explore mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Allende Higher Studies Center, as an educational institution, has a responsibility to ensure its admissions process is fair, transparent, and compliant with its own internal regulations and any overarching educational standards. The introduction of a new admissions criterion, especially one that could disproportionately affect certain applicant groups, requires careful consideration of its potential impact. The challenge lies in balancing the institution's desire to select the most suitable candidates with the ethical imperative to avoid discrimination and maintain equity. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough impact assessment before implementing the new admissions criterion. This assessment should systematically analyze the potential effects of the criterion on different applicant demographics, identify any unintended discriminatory outcomes, and explore mitigation strategies. This aligns with principles of fairness and equity in admissions, ensuring that the criterion serves its intended purpose without creating undue barriers for qualified individuals. It also demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible institutional practice, which is often implicitly or explicitly required by educational regulatory bodies and ethical codes governing academic institutions. An incorrect approach that involves immediate implementation without any prior assessment fails to uphold the principles of fairness and equity. It risks introducing a discriminatory practice that could lead to legal challenges or damage the institution's reputation. This approach disregards the potential for unintended negative consequences and prioritizes expediency over responsible decision-making. Another incorrect approach, which involves seeking informal feedback from a small, potentially biased group of current students or faculty, is insufficient. This method lacks the rigor and objectivity required for a comprehensive impact assessment. The feedback may not be representative of the broader applicant pool and could be influenced by personal opinions rather than objective analysis of potential impacts. This approach fails to provide the data-driven evidence needed to make an informed decision and could lead to the adoption of a flawed admissions policy. A further incorrect approach, which involves relying solely on the perceived academic merit of the criterion without considering its broader implications, is also problematic. While academic merit is important, it does not negate the need to assess the criterion's fairness and potential for disparate impact. This approach overlooks the ethical and practical considerations of admissions policies, focusing narrowly on one aspect while ignoring others that are crucial for a just and effective system. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the proposed change and its objectives. 2. Research relevant institutional policies, ethical guidelines, and any applicable educational regulations. 3. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment considering potential effects on various applicant groups. 4. Gather data and evidence to support the assessment. 5. Consult with relevant stakeholders, including admissions officers, faculty, and potentially legal counsel or ethics committees. 6. Develop mitigation strategies for any identified negative impacts. 7. Make an informed decision based on the assessment, evidence, and consultation. 8. Document the decision-making process and the rationale behind it. Question 20. Quality control measures reveal a consistent pattern of lower-than-expected performance scores in a specific foundational course across multiple cohorts at Allende Higher Study Center. The Internal Review Committee is tasked with assessing the impact of this trend. Which of the following approaches best addresses the situation in accordance with the principles of academic integrity and institutional accountability? Option A. Implement a mandatory remedial program for all students enrolled in the course without first investigating the underlying reasons for the widespread performance issues. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the course curriculum, teaching methodologies, and assessment strategies, seeking feedback from both students and instructors to identify potential areas for improvement and implement data-driven adjustments. Option C. Immediately revise the grading rubric for the course to align with the observed performance levels, thereby ensuring that future cohorts appear to meet the expected standards. Option D. Focus on highlighting the exceptional performance of a small subset of students in the course to counterbalance the overall trend in reporting to stakeholders. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the course curriculum, teaching methodologies, and assessment strategies, seeking feedback from both students and instructors to identify potential areas for improvement and implement data-driven adjustments. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the potential conflict between academic integrity and the perceived need to meet institutional performance metrics. The pressure to demonstrate positive outcomes can lead to overlooking or downplaying genuine issues, which is a significant ethical and regulatory concern in educational institutions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the pursuit of positive reporting does not compromise the accuracy and integrity of the assessment process. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective impact assessment that prioritizes the identification of root causes and the development of evidence-based solutions. This aligns with the principles of good governance and academic oversight expected within any reputable educational institution. Specifically, it adheres to the implicit regulatory framework governing higher education, which mandates transparency, accountability, and a commitment to continuous improvement based on factual data. By focusing on understanding the underlying reasons for the observed discrepancies, this approach ensures that any interventions are targeted and effective, thereby upholding the institution's commitment to quality education and student success. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on superficial improvements or attempts to reframe the data without addressing the core issues fails to meet regulatory expectations for due diligence and responsible oversight. Such an approach risks masking systemic problems, which could lead to a decline in educational quality and potentially violate institutional policies or broader educational standards that require accurate reporting and demonstrable improvement strategies. Another incorrect approach that involves immediate punitive measures without a proper investigation is also professionally unsound. This bypasses the necessary steps of root cause analysis and can create a climate of fear rather than fostering a culture of learning and improvement. It fails to acknowledge that performance variations can stem from a multitude of factors, some of which may be beyond the direct control of the individuals being assessed. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the problem and its scope. Second, gather all relevant data objectively. Third, analyze the data to identify root causes. Fourth, develop a range of potential solutions, assessing their feasibility and impact. Fifth, implement the chosen solution. And finally, monitor the outcomes and adjust as necessary. This iterative process, grounded in evidence and ethical considerations, is crucial for maintaining institutional integrity and achieving sustainable improvements.